Welcome. So today I'm going to be doing some analysis. Analysis of my favorite player, Zest. So yeah, it's just going to be analysis. This is going to be my process to how I learn a build. So as you can see, I've got the beautiful Zest here before us and the young Maru. So obviously two of the best players of their own respective races. So I think they're really good players to choose to do analysis on. Their specific game is going to be very high quality. So I'm doing the specific one where Zest does a DT drop at the beginning of the game. So I've seen the game already. So that's one step. Is always the first step in my process to learn a build is always going to be watch and decide. So you're going to watch the build and you're going to decide if it's something that fits well with your style or if it doesn't fit well with your style, or if it might be something that would help you grow as a player for X reason. I'm bad at cheese. I should learn this cheese because of that reason. I am bad at macro. I should learn this stable build so that I become better at macro. I'm bad at micro. I should learn this multitask intensive build. Something like that. Then the second step of my analysis is going to be analyze and write down everything. So I'll show you guys the tools that I'm going to use, but basically what you want to do is record. So pen and paper is good, internet document, Word document, anything. Just write it down. Write it down so you have some kind of reference, so you don't always have to be pulled out of the learning experience and just going back into the VOD to note timings, or I forget, I'll just make it up, that kind of thing. It can be very sloppy. It slows you down when you're learning. So write it down. It also helps you internalize the information quicker because you've written it down, because you've gone through the process of pulling it out of a video, not just taking it from a build order on the online, or, taking it from a build that you might download online in either a replay or a guide. And then the final step is going to be to synthesize the build. So what you're going to need to synthesize the build is obviously StarCraft, mouse, and keyboard. But more than that, you're just going to need to be able to go back through your notes. You will have to internalize them well enough, and then you'll synthesize the build. And that process will show you problem areas within the build, errors in your execution, which allows you then to go back, correct those errors, and push the build towards push the build closer to perfection. And perfection, the word perfect today, is going to be what Zest played, which doesn't mean that it is perfect theoretically or philosophically. It just means that we are shooting for the goal of playing as Zest did. So obviously there's lots of arguments that maybe we shouldn't try and play like pro players, but for this example and for what I'm trying to teach here, which is analysis and build order learning, the whole idea behind that kind of thing is emulating something which is already in place, not creating something new. So without further ado, I'll show you my tools. So first tool, it's already here on the screen. You can see it. It's that way. And it's the VOD. So we need to have a VOD. We need to have, it has to be a video recording, basically. A replay will work, but it's going to be slightly less ideal. So video recording is the best. I use GSL because I think that the videos on GSL are going to be of the highest quality, just because the players there are the very best in the world at any given time. The other tool that I'm going to use, these are basically the only two tools that I'll use, is going to be some form of notebook. So my preference is online stuff because you can print it off, you can do whatever you want with it. You can send it to other people, you can share it with other people if it's on a Google Doc, you can archive it, and you can sort it and manage it. So I use Google Docs, and my build tool build order tool looks like this. So I have a color, one for each matchup. Blue is for verse Terran, green is for verse Protoss, and red is for verse Zerg. In the left column, I have the supply count, which also doubles as a timing count. Then I have the structure and the tech, which is whatever is built at said supply or said timing. And then in column C, I also have timing or extra info. So something that might go in an extra info column is, does it receive chrono boost? Do you build additional units of that type after the first one is completed? Is that unit skipped for some reason? If some game state is noticed, is there some implication to getting this unit that affects the game later on in the road? If I miss warp gate by 10 seconds, do I die to X timing because warp gate wasn't fast enough? That kind of information forces your brain to learn the information more, because there seems to be there's heaviness to it. There's a weight on that information. There's a reason why that information is important. If it's build this at 25 supply, there isn't really a reason other than a mechanical and arbitrary reason, which is at 25 supply. So having a reason like that, I will die to this if I don't do this, puts a lot of weight on it. It aids memorization and generally improves consistency and execution. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to jump in the VOD. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to write down key things, everything that I think is important. I'm going to put it in this sheet. Then I'm going to learn the build. So that's the process. Watch it and decide that you want to learn it. I've already done that. We don't need to do that on stream because it takes so long. Watch all the VODs. Find one you like. Choose that one. Done it. Then I'm going to analyze it, pull all the information out of the VOD, which I'm going to show you how to do. So I'm going to do it meticulously. A lot of this information I will already know, but I'm going to pull it out of the VOD how I would if I didn't know any of it. Then you're going to synthesize the build. And there's a bunch of tools that you can use to synthesize a build better, instead of just, I play the build and I pause, and then I do set action, and then I resume, and then I do set action, and then I resume. This is going to be really inefficient. You're going to spend a lot of time learning builds when you don't need to spend that much time learning them. So without further ado, let's do it. Let's see how fast I can learn this build. I may not learn it all today. I may learn it all today. We'll see. We're going to be joined by Tasteless and Artosis, my favorite commentators, for nostalgia's sake. So map is important to note. I'm going to be noting these things in the document, and I will show you the document every once in a while and run you through the points that I've written down. So I'm going to note the map. Maps are important because you may notice after you've learned the build that it doesn't work on certain maps for certain reasons, right? So if you were, say, preparing for a high-level tournament, or a high-level series, or a series that you really wanted to beat your opponent in, I would recommend ripping builds for specific maps. So you choose this build specifically for this map because there are this number of attack paths, or the main is configured in like an open way, or there's an extra blink-in path to the natural, something like that. And you choose the build for that based on a map. It can also be useful to choose, like if you do choose a build that you think will be overall good, then fine. You can try and use it on all maps. You may find that it doesn't work on one or two maps here and there for X reason. There's destructible rocks in the back and I can't defend it, something like that. So let's start right away. Legacy of the Void picks up much faster than Heart of the Swarm, so we gotta focus. So right now, this is the first focus moment right when they introduce the second player, okay? Right now, everything has happened that we need to know. There's a bunch of information here. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to make sure that the information is correct. So the normal thing to do would be 14 pylon. Obviously, he's going to build his first pylon. You're going to do that in every matchup. Now, what I'll show you here in my notes is exactly what information I'm going to take down from that pylon. So 14 pylon, and this is going to be between gas and minerals. So that's key. just because he positioned that pylon specifically in that location. Now, I imagine that that location is specific because he wants to block the Reaper from going around behind his mineral line or coming straight through his probes. So he's blocking two types of motion there with that pylon, which I think is really smart by him. So he's blocking motion up and through, and he's blocking motion around. So pretty nice by him, actually. So then we obviously saw a gateway come down. So the gateway is almost always, I'm going to come down on 16 because it comes down right after your unsupply block from the first pylon. So that's just a standard gateway timing. He puts it down below the gas, so it extends vision. It's not something that's built close to his nexus or hidden away in the center of his base, so that if, say, this is the wall and this is like the dead space, he doesn't build it in here, so like if a drop came in, it would be safer. He builds it out here to extend vision, most likely to check for a Reaper or to check for drops. It's not a key structure. It's not going to die early game, so it's not a key structure, so it's okay doing that. And then he's going to go 16 gas for that last gas, which we can see right now. He has 30 minerals, a gas has just started, and he has 17 probes. So he started the gas, made the 17th probe, because the gas is a little bit completed, as you can see there. So now I'll resume, and I gotta focus. So production tab's open. My eyes are gonna focus on the production tab, supplies, and minerals. Those are the most important things. So if the production tab closes, I'm gonna look only at minerals. And so when the minerals go down, I'll check the map, the mini map, and I can see if a new dot has appeared on the mini map, and then I can make an inference about what that structure would be. So I could see if he takes the other gas, I can see if he takes a nexus, I can see if he builds a pylon, and I can see if he builds another tech structure, say a second gateway or cybernetics core or a forge. Those are the only three options if he builds something beside the pylon that's already built. Okay? So I can make all those inferences. So I believe what he's going to do is make a 19 Nexus. I almost said 29 Nexus. I believe he's going to make a 19 Nexus at his natural. So he's going to rally, 18 rally. So at 18 he rallies his probe to the natural. And then now let's watch. Let's watch. At 400 minerals, 19, he makes a Nexus. And then he goes probe. And now I believe it's going to be 20 cyber. Cyber. In safe position. Okay, so let's pause. We got to deconstruct some stuff that we just saw. I picked it up very quickly because I'm very good at doing this, or I've done it for a long time. I'm going to go through it all just to make sure that you also understand what I picked up there. And you might have to go through this, say 3 or 4 times, that one video segment, to pick up everything that I was able to pick up. And that's totally fine. This is like a skill. It's like learning to play a game. It's learning to do analysis. So I start here. We got these 3 before. Now what he did, 18, he rallied his probe to the natural. Okay, so that's important. Okay. Then 19, Nexus, and then he resumed probes. So I make the little arrow which says, after the Nexus, make a probe. That's the very next thing you spend money on, is the probe. 20, Cyber. And he builds it in a safe position. So safer than the gateway's position. As you can see, the wall was here, the pylon was here, the gateway was here, closer to the wall, and the Cyber was further away from the wall. Clearly the Cyber is a key structure. You want Warp Gate to finish. You don't want it to die, so you lose the capacity to warp in stalkers later in the game. Now, one other key piece of information was his gas saturation, which we may have missed. So, gas saturation was when 16 on minerals, rally to gas. Probe that makes Nexus goes to gas. That's really important. So, that's going to make sure that you have enough minerals to make the Cyber right on 20. So, I'll show you in the VOD. We'll do it. We'll just rewind a little bit, And then I'll show you in the VOD exactly where that information came from. So here, he rallies over. You can see there's only 1 on gas right now. So we know he's rallying into gas. He didn't just saturate it with 3 right away. So he rallied 1 into gas, then 1 goes down. It's going to build his nexus, then watch this. We go back to his main. We're going to see 2 on gas, 3 on gas, and that probe that built the natural is the 3rd one. See, it goes into the gas, he pulls 1 off, puts it back in, cyber. Gas probe makes cyber. Then we're going to get 21 gas. So now I'm back in. I'm analyzing again. Okay, so now I have to make inferences. What is he spending? He's probably accumulated 100, 200 minerals during this time that we see this kissing picture, right? Now we're seeing his face. So what's he building during this time? We hear a mule come down. See? A pylon. Pylon is almost done. That's the only other thing he's built, right? So let's look at the minimap. There is a pylon in his natural. Right? So there's a pylon in his natural. So most likely, now this is where we have to make a choice. What supply count are we going to write down in our notes? There's my notes. So I'm going to infer that it was gas. So he did cyber, then he built a probe. Then gas, then he built a probe. Then 22, pylon, then he built a probe, which would supply cap him. And this pylon is going to be at natural for tech. Or hidden position. So we know this is a DT build. I've labeled it as a DT build at the bottom of my... You can't see it, sorry. I labeled it as a DT build at the bottom of my document on the tab. So it says Zest's DT drop. So we know it's a DT building. This pylon is specifically for the Twilight Council and the Dark Shrine. So that second pylons are really key in Legacy because you expand much faster, you get more supply from Nexuses, so you have less pylons early game. So pylon positioning is very key to deny scouting and to place tech structures. Alright, so I missed some information there, so we're going to go back just a little bit. Okay, so now 21, he makes a probe. Then you see the probe goes over, he makes the gas. Now that gas probe is going to go to the natural. It's going to the natural right now to build the pylon. So that's good. I actually pulled out a little bit more information there from watching the minimap carefully that time. So the gas probe moves to the natural to build the pylon. So now, when this pylon finishes, I saw he went Adept plus Warp Gate. So it finishes Adept, Warp Gate at the same time. So now when we go back to Zest Space, we're going to want to check, did he switch Chrono Boost to one of those two things? Now Robo. So 26 Robo. Now one thing I'm going to note here with the Robo timing. So I'll show you the notes that I have so far. So, gas, the probe goes to the natural, 22 pylon, this is for tech. Then he's going to make Adept and Warp Gate right when the cyber and pylon finish. They're going to finish around the same time. Then he's going to put up his Robo. So, the reason he most likely gets the Robo first is because build time of Robo plus Warp Prism. Okay? He might also want to grab an Observer. He wants the Warp Prism to get across the map before the DTs warp in. So there's lots of different reasons. He's also skipped Mothership Core to have the gas to build the Robo. So those are a bunch of different things that are playing into this build. You don't necessarily have to know that to rip the build, but if you do have the perspective, it's good to note those kind of things so that if you had to react to something, you could switch things around. Say, get a Mothership Core instead of the Robo if you notice some kind of early attack coming. So what I want to see here, I'm going to rewind again a bit. I want to note the exact timing that that Robo starts. Just for my own execution, so I can see if I've saturated my minerals perfectly, that kind of thing. So let's see. So it's going to be with his next, if we look at the gas count, exactly when that gets to 100, he's probably going to want to build the robo. So 217 is a robo. So only one adept. Twilight. 29 Twilight. And it was 238. So right there, when I'm checking those kind of things, right when I see the text structure, my eye goes right down. Like visually, it just goes straight down to the timer. So text structure, timer. And I check the timer, and then right as I hit the timer, I go up and I check the supply. Right? So those are the things I do. And I rewind a little bit, and I check it again if I wasn't sure. So if the supply is like a little bit higher than I thought it would be, or it changes right as I look at it, I'm like, let's check it. And I check it. So that time it changed, it went up to 30 right as I checked it. But I had seen it as 29, so I'm like, okay, it's 29. So 29 Twilight, which is the next 100 gas he gets after the robo. So you can start internalizing it already. The supply counts are great, but it's also good to realize this is how I'm spending my gas, right? Adept, Warp Gate, robo, Twilight. All the while building constant probe production. So this is important. 32 Mothership Core. And I knew it was 32 because I can look at the supply right when it starts and then subtract 2 because the Mothership Core costs 2. Basic math. I know this video may seem kind of condescending and awful. I just want it to be really basic and make sure that all the points are coming across really clearly. Okay, so this is a dense part in the build, so I'm going to go back and rewatch that because that's really important. So the Warp Prism comes out, Warp Gate's about to finish, and he started a Dark Shrine and 2 gateways at the same time. So most likely, the time to construct a Dark Shrine and gateways and transform the gateways to Warp Gates is the same time. And then on top of that, the time it takes the Warp Prism to get into position is most likely around that time. So on a bigger map, this build might not line up. So those are some really good things to note. And I want to go back and rewatch that segment to make sure that I have all those timings perfectly down. I believe I recorded them all correctly. So the sequence, so my early game sequence is I'm going to think standard fast expand because the build I wrote down, which I can show you, I'll show you how I'm chunking it in my mind. So this all the way down to here is standard fast expand. Okay, so everything up until line 10, standard fast expand. Past this, we've got first tech. This is what I call first tech, which is the sequence of tech that you choose before getting extra gateways or attacking units or extra gases, that kind of thing. So first tech, sort of you're establishing your tech route. And so usually you would define that as it's Twilight, it's a Robo, or it's a Stargate. But in this case, we're defining it by a combination of 2 structures, which makes this build a little more complex than something like just a Robo first build. Into gases, into extra gateways, into third base, something like that. So this one is going to be Robo Twilight. So you know that there's an order, Robo Twilight. That's my first tech. The first 200 gas I spend on anything tech related, Robo Twilight. Obviously the first like Mothership Core, Adept, Warp Gate, those kind of things are more interchangeable, but Robo Twilight, that's going to be the first tech. Then I start considering this mid-game setup. So it's everything after the first tech until the point when you are fully saturated on the saturation that you want to do what you want. So maybe it's expand, so you keep saturating. Maybe it is attack, so you stop saturating at 10 probes of the natural, something like that, right? So this is mid-game setup. Then past this, we could call, I guess, late game. It's going to be how we get into our third, things like that. You could also define this, I guess, as late mid-game. That's kind of how I think about it in my mind. And I would think about the steps after this as late game, like Stargate if this, this if this, this if this. It's just a basic set of reactions. There's no timings really associated with them. Maybe a rough timing, like around 13 minutes you want to have Storm finished or something like that. But everything else before this is much more specific. So let's see if I got my mid-game setup correct. So we see here, I've rewinded just to where he's about to start his robo. So robo goes up. Robo is actually, it's key that it's on the edge of his base. So then he's going to grab Twilight. Now let's watch Hawkeyes. So right at 32, he's going to start the Mothership Core. So this probe will pop out, and then boom, Mothership Core. He actually cancels one and then builds it, but Mothership Core. Now he's going to get Warp Prism. Warp Prism right when the Robo finishes. Then right when the Twilight finishes and he has enough gas, he's going to build the Dark Shrine. So watch this. His gas is nearing 150. Now, 39. So I chose 40, but 39 Dark Shrine. So you can see right as he accumulates enough resources to build whatever he wants to build, he builds it. So now what we want to see is, sorry, I'm rewinding again. This is how I go through this process, right? Tons of rewinding, going over the actions multiple times. So I'm already internalizing the build right now because I'm sort of practicing it mentally already. I'm thinking and trying to line things up in my own head, and I'm thinking about things like, did he cut probes to make those 2 gateways? Because I'm thinking to myself, if I kept making probes, maybe I wouldn't have enough minerals. So we're going to check now and see, did he cut probes to make those gateways? And if he did cut probes, when did he cut probes? Why? Right? Like, the why is obviously so the gateways will be on time. But yeah, so he doesn't chrono boost the Warp Prism. He just lets it continue. So see, he didn't cut probes. There, he makes 2 gates. So I saw that the minerals dropped before I saw on the production tab that the gates had gone up. So that means I could just be like, yep, the gates are going up, and then the gates go onto the production tab. So he queued them. The probe wasn't right at the location to build the gateways when he made them. So it was just a fast action. It wasn't like a really well thought out, they need to go down right here, so I'm moving the probe in preparation, that kind of thing. Which is totally fine. So now let's see what he does with his mid-game setup, how he transitions from the mid-game to the late game. So then after that, he's going to get gases. So his setup is get all, and look at this. You know what's crazy? This is the next pylon he made. It's actually crazy to me because normally you'd have a 3rd pylon by now, like when a Dark Shrine and stuff is coming. But so he's gonna get gas, pylon gas. You know what's important about that? I wrote down initially, so here in my build, I wrote down initially gases and then pylon. But he actually takes gas, pylon, gas. So maybe if you build gas, gas, pylon, the pylon isn't done when it's ready to warp in DTs. And you want it to warp in DTs. So gas, pylon, gas might make it so that you can warp in DTs right when you need to. It may be also that he doesn't want to get supply capped for... So now we have to ignore the action on the screen. 2 pylons, so he just gets 2 more pylons then. So those 2 pylons will just be so he doesn't get supply capped. And then third. So 423. He grabs his third. Third plus obs. Then 3 DTs. And let's check the timing that those DTs get warped in. So you see, he's literally ready to warp in all 3 DTs right as that finishes. 430. And his supply is 59. Okay, there we go. Tace's mid-game setup transitions into a third and multi-pronged harassment. Kind of beautiful, well thought out build. Seems like it has a ton of potential, right? You're going to get harassment done on the ramp, then you're going to get harassment done in one of the other bases, and potentially a third DT into another base. So, first of all, potential for game-ending damage, potential to pull your opponent apart with good play, and also potential to gain economic lead even if you don't deal that much damage, because you're going to focus their attention on their base where they can't be focusing on you. So overall, the game plan is pretty solid, and I really like what he's done with it here. He's set himself up very nicely with this. And it looks like he's going to get multiple obs, so he started his second obs already now. And you can see he's still making probes. So this whole time he's been making probes. There has been some times when he's cut in and out of probe production. I don't think deliberately. So let's see. He gets 3 more DTs and another prism. Like, I think it's interesting that he keeps up the harassment while really powering his economy. So what I'm looking for now, I've stopped recording exact timings. What I'm looking for now is the specifics. Is he going to get a Robobay next? Is he going to get Templar Archives? Is he going to get Charged? Like, what is his next big step in getting out of this? And it appears that it's Blink. So, you know what's very interesting is what he's anticipating here. So, the Observers, and then transitioning to Stalkers with a Mothership Core, is all anticipating some kind of counter push, right? Terran's been punched, he's going to punch back. You know he is, unless he's an angry player and he just leaves the game because he saw a Dark Templar, right? So, he's going to punch back. He's going to punch back. And you always have to anticipate that he's going to punch back, because you can't count on the fact that the other guy's just going to leave the game or his internet's going to drop or something, right? So he's going to punch back. So getting Blink is going to secure him against drops, and it's going to secure him against Liberators. And Blink is exceptional at defending things, but it's also exceptional aggressively. So he's chosen the most well-rounded thing to go into next, which seems like what you'd want to do if you've gained a lead with Dark Templar. Look at that pylon. That pylon positioning too is beautiful. Like, so he gets another Observer, 3 more Stalkers, so he's going up to 6, the magic number, double shots Medivacs, and then Forge. So I'll show you how I write this down. So I'm going to say Forges and Gases at third. See, look, he's already getting aggressive with like this tiny little number of Stalkers. And also look at Zest. He's floating so much money, but he's just dealing so much damage because he's had such a well thought out build. Like, he kills a bunch of SCVs. Now he's gonna his gateway explosion, as Tasteless would call it. So let's see how many he adds. 5, probably 5. So 5 gates and Templar Archives, all gonna come down the same. With charge. So it looks like he's going to transition into Templar charge composition. And a 4th. And then 4th to follow that up. So his punches have put him in such a huge lead, right? They've sort of springboarded him forward in the game, which is really nice. So I'll show you my notes and show you exactly what I took note of there. Okay. So here. This is his late mid-game. So his transition out of his attack, right? So here's his attack. I guess we can highlight that with a darker blue. That's the goal. That's what the build is shooting for, right? It's shooting for that thing. That's the key event in the build, which really is the thing that, like, oh, I flew my Warp Prism into a turret and I died, right? Like, because you can just screw up there. That's where the build ends for some games, right? But after that, if you do survive and they don't die instantly, what do? Right? You need to have a plan. So, one is you screw up, you lose, right? Whatever. Okay, you lost. Things didn't go away the way you planned them to, so you got to improvise. You got to make something up. Okay? So build orders are gone, then throw them out under the table. Figure something else out, right? Build something. Who knows? An oracle. Like, just try and do something. Maybe make a disruptor. Hope you get a huge shot. Something like that. It kills them. Great, your build worked. Congratulations, pat yourself on the back, do it again. They take damage, or they don't take damage, they survive, and the game state is even, or you have an advantage. Where do you go next? You have to go somewhere next. Where do you go? So he chose Blink, gets 6 Stalkers. Then after that, he's going to get Forges and Gases. So he uses all his gas. So, Blink, 6 Stalkers. That's a lot of gas, right? It's like a lot of gas. 450 gas. If my math is correct. Wait, Stalkers take 50 gas. Yeah, they do. Okay. And then he's going to get Forges and Gases. Then he's going to get 3 more Stalkers. Then he could actually get 3 more. He just didn't warp them in. And then he attacks again. But this time he has... Then behind that, he's going to get 5 gates, Templar Archives, and charge. So then he attacks actually here. So I'll just put this as sort of like the second punch in the build. It's a little bit less important, that's why I indented it. But it's also important. So he comes with this second push. It's 9 Stalkers, 2 DT, Warp Prism, Mothership Core, I believe. So he brings everything. He's just like, yeah, let's kill this guy. Let's go back and see. So like he's dealing a ton of damage here. Where is it? He's really safe. He's got a good team. He's in great shape. Where is it? He could even work another one at the front of this game. I barely know, but it might have been. It was hard to say right there. Oh, why can I not find it? Oh, I think it's here. It's here. It's totally here. Is intending to take a third base win. We're not entirely sure. He's now hitting the explosion of additional barracks. This attack also might be triggered. Right? So you have to think what other game state things happened. He was building, okay, Stalkers here. So he builds Stalkers for defense, right? Then Maru derps with his attack. So he attacks because Maru screwed up, right? Because he knows he doesn't need to defend at that point because Maru just threw away a Liberator. So he's like, yeah, okay, I'll attack. This is like some serious shuttle play here. Yeah, so 9 Stalkers. He doesn't bring the Mothership Core. But overall, really nice play here from Zest. Okay, so I think I've showed my process enough. It's kind of boring, it's kind of dry, so I know this isn't like an entertainment video. It's definitely targeted for education. So now, what do I do with it, right? I got this build, great. What am I going to use it for? I should point this way. What am I going to use it for? Okay, so first I want to memorize it. So memorizing is super important, so I'm going to chunk it off. That's going to be the best way for me to memorize something. So let's go against my color scheme, which I've so amazingly set up for like years, and now I'm going to screw it up. Okay, so this I'm going to call standard FE, which I talked about before. Okay, so there's my first chunk. This I'm going to call my first tech. There's my second chunk. This I'm going to call mid-game setup. Obviously, you don't have to use any of the terms I'm using. Use whatever you feel like is what you want for your game, right? Like, just do what you want. So then I'll call this pre-attack. Maybe I'll make it, I don't know what color to make it. I'm running out of colors, guys. Make it this like orangey color. And then down here we're gonna have blue. Oh, I should copy these and put them at the front. There we go. Make it look beautiful, right? Beautiful. And then here we have like, you know, okay, so this build is going to be much easier, not much more easy. This build is going to be much easier to internalize now because we've broken it into chunks, okay? So what we can do at this point is work on memorization away from the game. So first of all, we don't want to play the game because if we play the game, we have to do mini tasks. We have to use our eyes to focus on things on the screen which we want to look at. We have to use this hand, maybe this hand, to use the keyboard. You have to use this hand to use the mouse. All three of these things need to coordinate with each other to make actions happen within the game. But all of that needs to be fueled by a brain that can move faster than our hands. If our brain cannot move faster than our hands will not move quickly. They will move slowly. Not because our hands are slow, because our brain is slow. So we have to make our brain fast. How do we make our brain fast? Well, we memorize the build really well. Because then we don't have to think about the build. It's just something that we know. So then what we're working on is the coordination for executing the build. Because we can recall the build so quickly. So what I would suggest, this is what I did initially when I was really bad at internalizing information, was I would write them down on cue cards and I would memorize each cue card individually as a step in the build. So I would memorize my standard FE one day. So what I would do is I would go through and I would say, all right, I'm going to memorize the standard FE, and I might chunk it, right? Like first chunk, pylon to gas, right? Second chunk, rallying probe to nexus, right? 18 rally, nexus 19. Then post nexus, cyber, gas, pylon, adept warp gate. That's a big chunk, right? It's 4 different actions, 5 different actions actually, right? And there's some complications going in all those. Where do you put the pylon? Those kind of things. Memorize all those details so you know. Now, when you're memorizing, I said break it into chunks. So memorize in a small chunk. So my first chunk is going to be pylon, gateway, gas. I can literally just memorize that like a rhyme or something. Pylon, gateway, gas. Pylon, gateway, gas. Pylon, gateway, gas. Right? It's stupid, but you can do it, right? And now you probably can't forget it, right? Like pylon, gateway, gas. Okay, I got it. And you probably will never forget that because it's probably what you do at the beginning of every game. Now, what am I doing when I'm saying that? Am I just saying the words pylon, gateway, gas? No. Inside my brain, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to visualize what I want that to look like. So when I say pylon, gateway, gas, I'm literally visualizing, like I'm creating a little movie in my head of myself building those buildings exactly where I want to build them. So pylon, I see it between the minerals and the gas. I can like see it in my mind's eye. Gateway, I can see it near the edge, sort of off to the side of that one gas. And then I say gas. But in this case, I'm going to say gas. And I'm going to move it to the other gas because I want it to be on that gas so the probe rallies to it faster, right? From the nexus. That's a little thing that I would try instead of building the gas on the other side where it has to walk longer to get to the gas. So pylon, gateway, gas. I'm going to see that, right? Now the next step, so now I've got that. I've done a little bit of work on that. Let's say maybe you do 5 minutes on it. Like your memory is going to be so much better if you do 5 minutes than if you do 25 minutes of like pause, play, pause, play, pause, play. You're not getting anything out of that. You're not really memorizing anything. You're confusing your brain by adding in hands and eyes and brain all at once. It's too much for you to take in. So take in small amounts of information, take them in extremely quickly and extremely thoroughly. So because you can visualize, you can do everything. Instead of like pause, oh, I built the pylon in the wrong place, I'll do that right next time. Also, if you do that kind of thing, you're making mistakes. And mistakes internalize. Like if I visualize, and I visualize the pylon in the wrong place, I'm more likely going to build it there every single time. Because I've trained my brain to do that specific set of actions. Like when I build the pylon, I build it over here. No, I don't want that. I want to specifically place the pylon in my mind. I want to know it goes there because of some reason. Maybe you don't have a reason. Train your mind. It's going to go there. Maybe you'll discover the reason why it goes there, which is the beautiful thing of taking builds from such exceptional players, because you discover reasons and you learn about the game through their experience. So then what you're going to do, next step, I had said here, it's going to be 18, 19. So 18, I'm going to visually see the little rally mark moving and how the arrows move down it, like tiny little details like that. And it's moving to my natural. And the pointer of it is clicked right in the center of where my nexus would be. So the probe's going to move to the exact spot it needs to be moved to. And then I'm going to see 19. I'm going to have 400 minerals. I'm going to build the nexus. And I'm going to rally the probe back to my gas in my main base. So I forgot a piece of information here in my memorization process, which is when do I change my probe rally? Now I'm not sure about that. And I can't intuit that by doing visualization exercises. So that's going to be something that I add in when I start synthesizing the build. So playing it in an actual game. So yeah. So then the next step is going to be cyber. So I'm seeing it. Cyber. Pylon at my natural, right? Oh, sorry. Cyber. Whoa. Cyber. Gas. Rallying it to the natural. Pylon in my natural. Sorry, everything's going to be backwards for you when I'm pointing, but cyber would be gas, and then it would be pylon in the natural, and then my cyber is going to finish. I'm going to make adapt and warp gate. Beautiful. So that's how I would chunk a section of the build. The next section is going to be easy. I consider that, I want to chunk that together just because it's my first tech. My first tech is something I always put together. It's a short action, but I want to know it. I want to be secure with it, and then I want to move on to something else. Because I know that if I group Robo, Twilight, Mothership Core, Warp Prism, DT, Warp, Gateway, or Gateways, because there's two, whoops, forgot to write that. If I group all of those 6 actions together, I'm going to forget. I know I'm going to forget one of them, because it's too much. I need to have like something that's like 3 or 4 actions. The reason I chunk so much at the beginning is because I do this almost every single PVT that I do. So essentially, once you get really good at this process, you don't have to remember any of this. The first thing that you remember in a build is this, which is a simple action, Robo Twilight. I know that. It's an order, that's it. I don't have to memorize anything. So then the only thing that you actually memorize, you say, I'm doing a DT drop, which covers off all of this information. So you didn't need to memorize any of that. Then, what you have to memorize is you have to memorize this portion of the build. That's it. That's an entire build order, right? You have to memorize a sequence of 4 actions to get you set up, which means you can do the DT drop, right? And then you have to memorize a sequence of 3 actions to get yourself set up for late game after the DT drop. So there's a total of 7 actions that you need to memorize once you're proficient at executing an early game standard fast expand and understanding how to spring into first tech from that. So, pretty nice. It's minimal amount of information, right? You could look at this and say, I got to memorize 24 lines of information, which each line has 3 to 4 pieces of information in it, right? But it's really not that. You really only have to memorize maybe 7 pieces of information, which are tied or triggered by other pieces of information, right? Like, you could essentially tie these actions together. You could say, whenever I make my mothership core, I make a warp prism. So that's one action. Mothership core into warp prism, one action. DT into 2 gateways. So you know 450 minerals at that point in the game are spent on DT shrine and then 2 gateways. Then after that, see, I already grouped these actions. I didn't go like gas 39 or gas 45, pylon 45, gas 46. I grouped them. 45. At 45, I start this sequence. 45. Gas, pylon, gas. Right? Gas, pylon, pylon. Right? That's really what it is, because you could group these in with it. Then I did another grouping. Third, observer. And then I know at that point, boom, my attack starts. Third, observer, attack starts. So I'm grouping a bunch of actions together to make them easier to memorize, so that my list of things that I have to memorize shrinks. But I only do this by going through first and memorizing really basic chunks, right? Like just the first 3 actions, then the next 2 actions, then the next 4 actions. And I memorize all those things. And when I've proficiently memorized those, then I can chunk that whole thing down because I don't need to work on it anymore. It's not something that I need to specifically work on memory for, because I've already memorized it. I can just like say it in my sleep and that kind of thing. And I've visualized it so much that I don't have to think about building placement. I just know where my buildings are placed. So now what I would do is I would go into a game and I would test out my knowledge. So let's see if this is going to work. This is the only part of my setup that I didn't test today, which was, can I actually play a game and have my StarCraft scene switcher change the scene? I'm not going to play the whole way through it. I'm just going to play part way through it. I haven't been playing very much recently, so it's going to be kind of sloppy. I'm going to try and not spam or go too fast. I want to make it really clear everything I'm doing in this build. So I'm going to play versus AI, so it's extremely low stress. So remember where my pylon goes? It goes right there. Remember where my gateway goes? It goes right there. Remember where my gas, or remember where his gas went, not where I wanted mine to go. So there's a little thing. Tiny mistake I made, right? So I know I can go up to 19, 17, 18, 19. So 18, I'm going to rally to the natural, right into the center. And I know at that point I'm going to have 1 on gas. So I always hotkey my 18th probe. And I'm going to rally back onto gas. So this probe will be 2, and this probe will be 3. So I know that this guy makes it back, and then he pulls 1 off gas, right as that one comes back to make the cyber here, and then goes back on gas. So I know at this point, I'm going to get 21 gas, send him to the natural to make 22 pylon. So now here I'm at my natural. This pylon is going to be for my dark shrine. So now I've got 3 on this gas. my warp gate is about to finish. I'm going to get warp gate and adept right as the pylon finishes. So now I'm going to wait. 26 is when I'm going to build my robo. I'm going to build it near the edge of my base. Then I know I'm going to grab Twilight Council. Whoops. So now I've set up my first tech. So now right after this, I'm going to go up to 32. And then I'm going to grab Mothership Core. So there it goes, Mothership Core. And then Warp Prism. Just lines up beautifully. And now I know that I'm going to get my DT tech and 2 gates. So DT tech, 2 more probes. Now I'm going to grab my 2 gates. So now here's where we start setting up that scenario where we're going to grab everything we need to transition. So you see here, my minerals are starting to float. So like right now, it makes tons of sense that I would build oops, I actually like just forgot what the hotkey for DT was. Oh, and see, okay, so now I realize, okay, so it's good that this happened. So I played the build perfectly until this point, and then I made one mistake. So my one mistake was, now look, I don't even have to look at my build to know what my mistake was, because I've gone through it so many times in my head to this point that I've already internalized it. So my execution got away a little bit in the way of my thinking, and I missed something. So what did I miss? Gas, pylon, pylon, pylon. And I was thinking, I feel like I'm getting my third a little too quick, because it should be third observer, and then 3 DTs and I attack right away, right? But, what? So I should have attacked at 4:30. I tried to warp in my DTs at 4:30 and they didn't warp in because I was supply blocked, right? So I was confused. Why did that happen? I missed 2 pylons. I missed 2 pylons because my third was a little bit too quick. So there was my mistake. That was my only mistake. So now I played that test game. Most likely I'm not going to forget that in a real game. I would go over that again to really reinforce that knowledge. But I'm probably ready to take this build to the ladder now and test it out. You guys might need more time to really figure out if the build is ready to go to the ladder. I would say take as much time as you want. When I started this process, when I started learning builds, it took me a month to learn my first build. So one build, it was for all 3 matchups, and it took me a month to learn it. The build went to 50 supply, so about where I have now, and it took me a whole month to learn it and to be able to execute it well every game. So take your time in learning a build. And you're going to speed up the more builds you learn. So once you learn one build, don't just stop there. Keep going. That's what StarCraft's about. It's about always pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. So I hope this was helpful. I hope I didn't sound too like know-it-all because I didn't want to. My goal was just to help everyone out. So if a really like a bronze player can come and they can kind of learn from this, or a more advanced player can come and they can maybe still pick up a couple things that will help them out. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'm going to make more of these because it's really fun. Peace.